Herc, the United States and Mexico. Between those two, who do you think is more likely to get upset in a quarterfinal?
To get upset in a quarterfinal here, I think it's Mexico. And it's a combination of a few things. I know Costa Rica's struggling. I know the Costa Rican fan base wants nothing more of Luis Fernando Suarez. They want to get rid of him, and they may be right. Actually, you are right. You should get rid of that coach. You're going nowhere without him or with him. But Mexico's struggling right now as well. And the first two games maybe were papering over cracks, right? It's the Jimmy Lozano effect, the Lamborghini, everything's fine, we're winning, we're scoring goals, the players are happy. And then it's Qatar in a game you thoroughly dominated, and you come crashing back down. And the reason you come crashing back down is because now this team, a team that mentally, I don't want to say weak, but is shocked. Coming against a Costa Rican team that is very gritty, very difficult to play against, maybe defensively has their own issues, gave up 4 goals to Martinique. But a team that out of the 6 goals they scored against Martinique, 4 were on dead balls. Something, set pieces, something that Mexico thoroughly struggles with. A team that is lethal in transition with players like Joel Campbell. A team that always plays Mexico to the brink. Last Gold Cup, it was actually, if memory serves me right, penalty kicks that ended up being the difference between the two. This is a team that knows how to play against Mexico, and Mexico right now is a team that's wounded. And then if you look at the other side, it's the U.S. that on paper is just more talented than Canada. And I, for the life of me, do not know what John Herdman is doing. John Herdman, just keep your mouth shut. John Herdman, just don't say anything. John Herdman, please, for the life of me, I cannot understand why you keep trying to give a team that is better than you bulletin board material. It's not hyping up your team. It's just setting them up for failure. So right now, out of the two, it would have to be Mexico.
No. John Herdman saying, bring it on, and that Canada wanted the U.S. in the quarterfinal. It's the matchup they wanted. Look, I got to be honest with you, Eric. I don't see either of these teams going out in the quarterfinals or really being threatened. And that's not to say that I think the U.S. and Mexico are so great, right? We know what happened with Mexico against Qatar, and the United States really only played one real team in that group phase. And I think we agreed on this show, they were not the better team, right? They were lucky to get out of that game.
Right.
With a draw. They very easily could have lost to Jamaica. So I'm not necessarily impressed with what USA and Mexico have done. I'm that confident. But you got to look at what these other teams are, man. Canada shipped multiple goals against Cuba and Guadeloupe. What are they gonna give up against the United States? And Costa Rica has not brought anybody. They got 5 dudes on this roster. That's it. Who coming into this tournament had more than 15 caps. I mean, this Costa Rica team on paper is bad. And then if you saw them play at all, forget the 2-1 loss to Panama. I'll accept that. The 0-0 against El Salvador was a war on the beautiful game. I mean, that was among bad games in the Gold Cup. That was about as bad as I've seen. So I don't think this Costa Rica can truly threaten. I don't think this Canada can truly threaten. If I'm picking Mexico, and I do think Mexico is safer here, Herc, it's because I think the gap between Mexico's A's and Costa Rica's B's, which, by the way, Costa Rica's B's don't have Keylor Navas, and that's a huge difference maker, is much more significant than the gap between
Keylor Navas any Gold Cup.
Is the USA B's and Canada's B's. That's the difference here for me. That said, Herc, if Mexico lose to this Costa Rica, this Mexico, we can talk about the fracaso at the World Cup. We can talk about the 3-0 against the U.S. in the Nations League. Those might be more impactful, but this would be a new rock bottom. And we can forget talking about federation and coaches and da-da-da-da-da and all that stuff, Herc. At this point, if this version of Mexico, which is as close as you can get pretty much to the A team, loses to a Costa Rica that really has not brought anybody, it is a huge, huge indictment of the Mexican player. And I'm worried, Herc, that we're getting closer and closer to that conversation. The Mexican players, if they have anything left, have to have a response against this version of Costa Rica.
You know, for somebody who's certain that it's more likely to happen that the U.S. men's national team loses to this Canadian team than the Mexican team to the Costa Rican team, you've got a lot to say about Mexico and the what-ifs, what would happen if they lost. You are the most pessimistic person I know when it comes to the Mexican national team.
I'm nervous.
You are the most pessimistic person I know. Okay. You honestly think it's, trust me, it's a game. Anybody can lose.
Of course.
Off of what you've seen in this, no, I know, but off of what you've seen in this first round of games, out of these two teams, you're going to tell me the U.S. is more likely to lose than Mexico?
Yes, absolutely. And again, I'm pointing, if I look at the Qatar game,
Okay.
right? The Qatar game is a disastrous, terrible, awful result. It is not what we've seen from Mexico in the past, Herc, which is terrible performances.
It's exactly what we've seen from Mexico in the past. It's exactly what they dominated shot creation.
No, Mexico has not been dangerous
and they can't
for
finish.
years.
That's exactly what we've seen from them.
No. Mexico lost its danger.
I'm getting confused
lost its edge under Tata Martino. Lost its edge. This Mexico was dangerous. They couldn't finish.
You bring up a game that the U.S. did not lose to prove why they will lose. And you neglect the game in which Mexico did lose to back your argument of why they won't lose.
Right.
Make sense.
Mexico looked better. Mexico looked better losing to Qatar, created more chances, was more dangerous than the U.S. against Jamaica, Herc. And this is the U.S. B team. I'm leaning on this roster as well.
Mexico
You're acting like Mexico hasn't brought its A team.
Losing than the U.S. did not losing.
Yes, Herc. Yes, Herc. You have to acknowledge Mexico played well in the first two games, and the third game is a fluke. It's a fluke. They have not played terribly for 3 straight games leading into this.
I can't throw
the Mexican performances.
I'm not trying to defend the U.S. here, but who had better competition? Who had better competition out of the two in the group?
In the group? Oh, by far Mexico. By far Mexico. Across the 3 games, by far Mexico.
They played Jamaica?
The U.S. had 2 training matches, Herc. Please.
They played Jamaica? What was Honduras? That wasn't a training match? Qatar shot once on goal.
Honduras is
that
more
wasn't
than
a training
Saint
match?
Kitts, Herc. Honduras is more than St. Kitts. It's more than Trinidad, who didn't even qualify for the tournament, Herc. Please.
Hold on.
Please.
Who played better competition? Was Jamaica not in their group?
Jamaica's the best team out of the other teams.
You know this.
I know they are. Let's get to Jamaica.
Jamaica's my friend. You know this. Okay, go ahead.
Let's get to Jamaica, because they are in this bracket as well.
Get to Jamaica, man.
So, of the underdogs, of the remaining underdogs, right? We talked about Canada, we talked about Costa Rica. So that leaves us Qatar and Guatemala. Who do you think is the bigger threat in the quarterfinal?
I think it's Qatar. Now, I'll mention something on Guatemala in a bit, but Qatar is just that team, Carlos Queiroz, that it's just ugly, it's gritty. I mean, our colleague at ESPN Deportes, Hernan Pereira, pretty much asked Carlos Queiroz post-game. Pretty much asked Carlos, you are something else. Pretty much asked Carlos Queiroz after the game if he was okay with the way his team played. And Carlos Queiroz said, hey man, listen, realistically, we have to play this way. It's part of the art of winning. We don't have the players to play any different. I'm doing what I need to do to win, okay? They're that type of team. They will grind, defend, make it dirty, transition with one striker. And here's the thing with Panama. Panama's probably the most well-worked team in this tournament. I say that with confidence. They're probably they're one of the best coached, most well-worked team in this tournament, but they don't have punch. They lack punch up top. They don't score a lot of goals. They're well-worked, well-versed, but they're not necessarily convincing. Qatar can easily put in a performance like they did versus Mexico, and Panama doesn't have the punch of a Mexico. So I can easily see this happening. Guatemala, on the other hand, Cinderella story. The best thing, I will repeat, I've said this in multiple platforms, the best thing about Guatemala is their people, is the fan base. Easily the best fan base in this tournament. Everywhere they go, they fill up the stadium, no problems, all fun, all support for their team. And because of that fan base, they've helped this team get to where they are. But the show stops here. It's in front of Jamaica. And Jamaica is a very good team. Jamaica has more power. Jamaica has more players. Jamaica has more talent. And I think the bus ride stops here for them.
All right, I'm going Guatemala. I'm going to give them the edge, right? I think one of the things we always talk about Jamaica is that the talent, especially on paper, doesn't always lead to performances, right? And I know they racked up a bunch of goals in the group phase, but if I go back to that U.S. game, they played well, but they couldn't capitalize. And you get into knockout rounds, you have to capitalize. And you're going to have to capitalize, Herc, against one of the hottest goalies in this tournament. Nicolas Hagen, he's 6'4", so he's a big target. He's got 2 clean sheets to his credit, and actually I think his best performance might have been against Guadeloupe in the group phase finale. He was standing on his head. He's the reason that Guatemala is able to come back in that game and get the 3-2 win and eventually go on to win the group. And then finally, what you mentioned, Herc, is what we saw at Red Bull Arena was an incredible home field advantage for this team. You have seen it. You have been there in the stands. I'm glad to hear you give us the color of it. I think it could make a difference for them against Jamaica. Still massive underdogs, Herc. But I got to believe in an underdog and a Cinderella story here. Go on.
Yeah, now, Hagen, the goalkeeper for Guatemala, he was also at fault in one of those goals, and you have to acknowledge how circumstantial this game was for Guatemala. They missed a penalty. Guadeloupe missed a penalty kick, and then there was a play where you thought the referee was going to ruin it for Guatemala standing in front of the player, and finally the player gets it, shoots it, and Guadeloupe's goalkeeper should have had it. It's a very circumstantial game that leads them to be in this opportunity. And also, do you remember Canada-Guadeloupe? When Guadeloupe equalizes in the last minute of that game, there are circumstances that see Guatemala top this group today. I didn't have them topping the group. I had them second place behind Canada. That said, it's a Cinderella story. And I repeat, the best part of Guatemala's run are its people, its fan base. But they don't have the talent. They're not as deep. They will really struggle to run with a team like Jamaica. They gave Guadeloupe a ton of opportunities, and if you give Jamaica those opportunities, players like Mikel Antonio, Leon Bailey, Damari Gray, they will hurt you. Yeah, I think the show stops here for them.
All right, Guatemala's underdog status reflected very much in the Gold Cup futures. Who will win it all, according to Caesars? Mexico still the favorite, plus 120. U.S. might be a good value. Herc, I know you love that Jamaica at plus 800 to win it all.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN+.